Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
Hello, everyone. Tamara here. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is Nick Brancato, a personal development coach and educator, and we'll be talking about his book, Prioritize Us. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, me as well. And the book is like great timing, and I thought it was really cool. So we can jump right in. What had you start with this book, or what brought you to this line of work, I guess?
Well, I came to this line of work through an education background and a computer background. I was a Microsoft systems engineer and a high school teacher and adult school teacher. I have a master's degree in education, and I taught for a while. I was a tenured teacher, and then I started playing poker and actually became a professional poker player and began teaching for the World Poker Tour and traveled all around the country doing seminars and teaching people like high stakes decision making under pressure and mindset management. And through that process, a big part of what I uncovered when coaching poker players was that the mental side of the game was as important, if not more important, than the strategic side of the game. And so poker really is life. And when you're playing at the table, you're playing for 10, 12, 14-hour days, multiple days in a row. And so anything that's going on inside your mind is going to impact your decision-making at the table. If you're distracted, you're not going to play well. And so what I found was that I was doing a lot of relationship coaching as well, because people were distracted by their relationships, both their romantic relationships and their other kinds of relationships. Sometimes they were distracted because they were single, and I did some dating coaching, and sometimes they were distracted because there was turmoil in their relationship. And so I began doing more and more coaching that way. And then what happened is my now wife began having some serious mental health issues. So it was a really hard time in my life, and we didn't know what was happening. She was having hallucinations, and she was having extreme paranoia. She lost a lot of weight because she thought her food was tainted and things like that. So it was just an awful period. And so we took a break to allow ourselves some time to figure out what was going on with her health. It's a happy ending. She's okay now and she's thriving. She's on the right medication. But what we found out was that she had paranoid schizophrenia. And so despite the severity of the situation, our relationship actually improved during the turmoil. And the reason was because all of our previous miscommunications and surface level issues fell to the wayside because we had the same priorities all of a sudden. Health and safety became our top priorities. And so for the first time, we were perfectly aligned. Instead of me being focused on my career or her being focused elsewhere, we were focused in the same areas. And so that was like an aha moment. And what it realized was that if having your priorities aligned makes everything easier, what other priorities are there in life that we can look at and more deliberately address? So I began identifying 10 core life priorities, and those are in the book. Things like career, communication, entertainment, health, safety. And what I found was that people are arguing over surface level issues so much of the time when the real conflict comes from misaligned priorities. So I identified these 10 core life priorities that cover most aspects of life, and then you rank them 1 through 10, and you compare them to each other, and what you get is a total different score. It's a system I created, and it's a data-driven tool that measures priority alignment and misalignment between partners. And so I tested this method in my coaching practice and with everyone I could find. And what I found was that couples were always uncovering misalignments. And just by uncovering these misalignments, they were communicating better because they were making the invisible visible just by simply understanding their priorities. And so I saw how effective the system was, and I decided to try to help as many couples as I could. And so Prioritize Us was born to help people navigate misalignment and prevent unnecessary conflict.
Yeah. I mean, when I read through, because you gave me a copy, thank you. And when I was reading through, it made complete sense, because I've done that. I've always said that having shared core values is like the thing that ties you, but those are like the major issues. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm in a now live-in situation when I was previously long distance, and some of the misalignment is coming to like becoming more known. So yeah, definitely this is like perfect timing. And I was going to ask one thing about my situation. One of our issues is I am very much like efficiency driven. Like I want to do everything smarter and like, just right away. And he's more laid back and there's no rush. And I don't know what that falls under, but if you can speak to that at all, or
That's great. That's actually a lot like me and my wife. I'm very systems oriented and efficiency driven, and she's the opposite in so many ways. And so that can fall under a few different areas. That can fall under growth, personal growth, because how you're spending your time, if it's personal development related. It can fall under communication. If you communicate in a more systematized, methodical way than he might be used to. It can also fall under relationships. How do you prioritize your time? What does quality time look like to both of you, and how much of it fits in with the other priorities in your life at this moment? And I think it's important to differentiate between something that you said. You mentioned values, and that's so important, having aligned values. But the difference between values and priorities is that priorities are ask the question, what's important to me now? So priorities change much more frequently than your values. Values are more like core beliefs. They change gradually over time unless something really significant happens. So they're more with you for most of your adult life, and your priorities are constantly changing. So you need to check in on them much more frequently.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And after having said that, I think quality time is our thing. Like we have differing opinions we both value quality time and prioritize it, but I think we just do it differently. And we do communicate about it, but anyway.
How do you do it differently?
I guess his idea of quality time is relaxing and chilling and, going with the flow. And I just want to be together. And I'm naturally just more efficient and quick and, rushing basically. So he just wants to like, his idea of relaxing with quality time is slow. And mine is like just getting stuff done or whatever it is. It's just, I'm always fast.
Right.
And he always says that we're not in a rush. And 90% of the time we're really not in a rush. So it's more my issue to slow down. Yeah.
Are you, when you're fast, is it because you're in the future a little bit, or is it because you're in the present and just things are speedy?
I'd say it's more in the past because my dad was so impatient growing up that my sister and I like learned and needed to be efficient. Like otherwise we'd get in trouble or like he'd get impatient with us.
Wow.
So it's more like a past thing. At least that's self-diagnosed, but
yeah, no, it's so interesting.
Yeah, that's where we say it's from. But yeah, but back to your book. I mean, I think these are like really amazing things for everyone to get, and it would make life so much easier if they understood this. So do you have examples? I know in the book you mentioned a few examples of people. Do you want to start there?
Sure, absolutely. I have a few examples that we can talk about for sure. One couple that I've been working with recently that comes to mind, they've been together for about 10 years, and one of them works full time and one of them stays at home and homeschools their two children that are around 5 and 7. This is an interesting dynamic because it's a non-traditional setup where she's working and he's at home. And so they have that going on. And when they take the test, what they discover is that they're misaligned in certain areas, but they're aligned in other areas. So they're misaligned in career and they're misaligned in sex, but they're aligned in spirituality. That's number one for both of them. So instead of looking at where they were first most different, I started with their strengths. So when there's a big gap in some area, like when the gap is more than, say, 5 between a priority, so you're ranking things 1 through 10, and then you're taking the difference between two priorities. So if you rank career number 1 and I rank it number 5, the difference between the two is 4. And so that's an average size difference. If it's 5 or more, then I would think that that's a pretty large difference. It could be as high as 9. And so when when there's significant differences in a relationship, I encourage couples to start with their strengths. So where are you aligned? What's the same? So in this case, a pillar was spirituality for them. So I ask, once people rank their priorities, I ask them to do a time assessment and take a look at how much time they spend on a weekly basis on each priority. So if career is number one, how many hours a week are you spending on it? 40, like a traditional work week? Is it 60, 80, 20? Okay. And then how much time do you spend on things like entertainment? So what you often find is that people rank entertainment low as a priority, but they spend a lot of time on it. And they have to do that self-check-in. So one of the great things about the book is that it helps you rank your own priorities and figure out what's important to you and check in with yourself so you can see if you're in alignment with where you want to be at. So once you compare that with your partners, what I discovered was that they had very little time allocated to spirituality, even though it was number one for both of them. So what we did is we created a few rituals for them to ground them in the relationship so that these differences that they were suffering from around career and sex become less prevalent in a day-to-day basis. They're more focused on their strengths at first. So in the morning, they just do a 5-minute ritual where they either meditate or pray together or just sit in silence with no devices and just spend quality time together in that way. And then they have another ritual before bed where they have a nightcap together with no devices. It's like 10 to 15 minutes. And they check in with each other around that. And that's where they do their check-ins for the day. And what they check in on is they ask each other, what are 3 big decisions that you made today or that you have to make tomorrow, depending on what day it is? And so what that allows is for them to be more on the same page and have a shared context for what's going on with each other. So even though one of them is very focused on career right now because they might get a promotion, so they're more focused on that, what they're able to do is he's able to know that she's focused on her career because of the decisions that she has to make from the day. And he's able to contribute or at least understand what's going on and why and help in the decision-making process. So even though he's not directly involved in her career anymore, it's a shared journey. They have a shared vision for it. And now they're more on the same page because of these check-ins. And they're grounded because of their rituals around spirituality where they weren't spending any time on it at all. Now they also have a weekly check-in where they spend an hour, which is so much more than nothing, doing the same thing that they do with a 5-minute ritual in the morning.
Yeah, especially like you said, if it's number one and they're not doing anything. And I was going to say earlier too, it's harder to understand what you think your priorities are versus what you actually do. So I like that you have the time where you actually consider or like really know what your priorities are from spending how much time seeing how much time you spend on them. So I could see where people think they're one thing and do another. Yeah,
my goal whenever I'm working on things for myself or with my relationship with my wife or when I'm doing any kind of coaching is to help people's actions be in alignment with their intentions. So this is especially true when I was coaching for poker. Like you want to execute the plan that you had ahead of time in real time under pressure when the decisions come up. So how you spend your time is a great way to check in with yourself to see if your actions are in alignment with your intentions, because your intentions are how you rank your priorities. That's how you mean to be allocating your resources, not just time, but also money, relationships, all the things at your disposal that are tools you can use to improve a priority and move things forward more efficiently. All those resources should be allocated to your biggest priorities. And you should make sure that you're not using a lot of time or money on things that are low priorities.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And earlier when you were talking about that example of him understanding like she was really gunning for a promotion in that time frame, so he could take it less personally if she had less available time for him. And I know that's something that I always need to, is like the more information I have, more clarification I have, the more I can cope with.
Yes, with change, right? Because having that shared context is so important, because instead of always wondering why the person is doing what they're doing, you now have an understanding of what their actions make sense to you, instead of you dealing with this unknown range where you just your mind makes up narratives that are often about you, often negative, and instead of filling in those gaps with your imagination, you're filling them in with the shared context. So one of the things I'd encourage anyone to do in a relationship, like right now or soon, is to just jot down your top 3 priorities to you. What are they right now? Ask your partner to do the same separately, and then just compare. And what you're going to find is there might be some overlap, but there's going to be a lot of differences. And it's going to spark these interesting conversations immediately where you can I encourage you to adopt a learning stance. Be curious about this. It's not about having the same priorities. It's not like, oh, look, we both have the same top 3. That's not the goal. The goal is to build communication and understanding by asking why. Why is this your top priority? Why is this in your top 3? Why is it so important to you right now? Are you surprised by mine? Here's why mine are important at the moment. Here's how it might change once I get the promotion. Here's how it might change if I don't get the promotion. And we could talk about things and develop like a shared vision together for what our future looks like. That's one of the things that I'd encourage you to do now that you're moved in with your partner, is to take some time and ask each other what a day-to-day shared vision looks like. Like, what does it look like separately? What does it look like to you? What does it look like? And then compare and see where the overlap is. Like, oh, wow, we would both love doing this every day. Oh, that's quality time. Or we'd both need our space for this little interval here so that we can miss each other and then rejoin and connect in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. We've definitely talked about those kind of things, but we could do more for sure. Yeah. And I like what you said about, people who tend to overthink. This will be very helpful to take the guesswork out and the imagination, like you said.
Right. And it takes out the emotion. So it's an objective, data-driven system where your priorities are your own once you list them. They don't need to be the same as your partner's, and you don't need to want your partner to have the same. Differences are actually good because you can fill in each other's gaps. You don't want to be so different so that you are constantly in conflict. But if you're so the same, then you actually have blind spots in your relationship sometimes. Because you're so aligned, you can take a lot of things for granted and be on autopilot. TDS scores are total difference scores. They can be between 0 and 50, and often somewhere in the middle is where couples kind of are in power mode because they complement each other. And if they're checking in and doing a priority alignment, then a check-in like this, then they're able to see where their gaps are and address those with communication before conflicts occur.
Yeah, I can see where that's very helpful. Do you want to talk more about the book, or how they can reach you, or how they can get the book first and then go in some more maybe? Or...
Sure. So actually anybody who's interested in the book, Prioritize Us, can get it on Amazon right now. And if you go to nickbrancato.com, you can actually get the ebook absolutely free for a limited time. And so go to nickbrancato.com, grab the ebook, and start working on your priorities right away. If you're interested in what we're talking about and you'd like to learn more, you can follow me on Instagram at personal dev coach, like personal development coach, personal dev coach on Instagram, and feel free to DM me with any questions that you have. I have a few spots available for coaching. If anybody's interested, they can contact me at nickbrancato.com. or DM me on Instagram at personal dev coach. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. Awesome. Cover the main things of the book, unless there's something we're missing.
So one thing I would want anyone to take away from reading Prioritize Us is that most people don't know how to measure the strength of their relationship beyond vague emotions. And so the Prioritize Us test and the TDS, it's like a relationship credit score. It tells you how aligned you are, what's working, what needs improvement. And the lower the score, the better your long-term outlook, the less conflict there likely is to be. And it's like, would you make a major financial decision without knowing your credit score? Probably not. The more data that you have, the easier it is. And don't let a high total difference score upset you. It's not a death sentence for the relationship. It just means that there's lower hanging fruit for improvement because you can communicate about these larger differences sooner than later before conflict occurs. And it will also help petty conflicts from occurring because you'll be focusing on things at a different level. You'll be focusing on deeper issues that are around priorities rather than surface level conflicts.
Yeah. Can you say more about that, just to give an example of what people typically fight about and what they're really fighting about?
Oh, sure. So a lot of people fight about things like the dishes, or like someone coming home late, or tasks. People fight a lot around tasks. And what's actually going on is that there's a differing priority. Their actions are in alignment with their priorities. And so once you look at priorities and you see, okay, you're late because your priority is career right now. So now it makes sense that you were spending extra time at the office. It wasn't because you don't want to have dinner with me. When it's something like the finance is something people argue over money all the time, but they often argue over petty things like, oh, that Uber was too expensive, or how could you buy the more expensive steak, or I don't know, silly things. And the finances is often all wrapped up in safety for people. So if you're not feeling safe because you don't have a financial situation that you're comfortable with, then even petty things will bother you when it's really about the larger financial picture. You don't particularly care about $10 here or there necessarily. That's usually rare. It's more that I don't feel safe because our finances aren't in order in whatever way. Let's address that. And then these other conflicts will sort of disappear.
Yeah. I think that's really clear. Thank you. Are there any other closing comments?
The last thing I'd like people to know is that relationships don't need to be identical to work, but they do require understanding, intentional conversations, and small but meaningful adjustments. And my journey with my wife and going through such turmoil really taught me that when your priorities are clear, relationships thrive even under the most difficult circumstances.
Yeah, that makes great sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. I think this information is going to help a lot of people, and I hope you go out and get his free ebook so you have access to all this information. And thank you again for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking with you.
Yep. And if you love this episode, be sure to tell your friends about it and rate it as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Frank Talk, sex and dating educates.